She was weeping in the rain. When the man gave her his umbrella, she learned that she was a queen. Raindrops and recognition. The sky above Luminara wept as though mourning something long forgotten. Mira Thorne hurried to pack away her herbs and remedies from the small market stall, before the gentle mist transformed into the torrential downpour the air promised. Her fingers, nimble from years of grinding roots and mixing tinctures, moved with practiced efficiency despite the cold that numbed them. Last chance for fever remedy, she called half-heartedly as the final market-goers scurried past, eyes downcast against the weather. No one stopped. No one ever did when rain threatened the coastal city. Sailors were superstitious about purchasing anything while the sea sent its warnings inland. Mira sighed, securing her meager earnings in the hidden pocket of her patched dress. Another day of barely enough. The apothecary who supplied her raw materials would not be pleased with such poor returns, and her tiny room above the chandlery might soon become a luxury she couldn't afford. As she hoisted her wooden case of remaining wares, the first true drops fell, fat, insistent raindrops that promised no quick end. Mira hesitated beneath the small awning, watching the marketplace empty around her. The sea called to her as it always did during storms, a strange homesickness for waters she'd never known. She'd never learned to swim, yet the pull of the tide tugged at something deep within her bones. When the rain doubled its efforts, Mira resigned herself to the soaking and stepped into the deluge. 3 steps in, her worn boot slid on the slick cobblestones, sending her sprawling. Glass vials shattered beneath her, precious remedies seeping into the stones. The loss overwhelmed her more than the fall itself, and tears mixed with raindrops on her cheeks. The sea gives, and the sea takes, she whispered to herself. An old saying whose origin she couldn't recall. Something her mother might have said perhaps before the fever took her years ago. Lost in her despair, Mira didn't notice the figure approaching until the rain stopped falling upon her. She looked up, blinking water from her lashes, to find a tall man standing over her, extending a peculiar umbrella made of what appeared to be oiled canvas, stretched over a frame of polished driftwood. Crying won't bring back the potions, though your tears hold more power than you know, he said, his voice carrying easily despite the rainfall. His eyes were the impossible blue-green of deep water caught in sunlight, and something about his gaze sent a shiver through Mira that had nothing to do with her soaked clothing. I don't recall asking for your observations, she replied, gathering the unbroken vials from the cobblestones. Or your pity. Not pity, he said, crouching beside her. Recognition. His fingers brushed hers as he helped collect a small jar of sea salt, and Mira felt a spark of warmth race up her arm. She jerked back, nearly dropping the jar again. Do I know you? She asked, studying his face. The sharp angles softened by the gentleness around his eyes. The dark hair pulled back with a cord decorated with tiny shells. Not yet, he answered, helping her to her feet with surprising strength. I'm Elian Frost, and you are Mira Thorne, the finest herbalist in Luminara, though you're better suited to water remedies than land cures. How do you— Come, he interrupted, guiding her toward a small tea shop still lit against the darkening afternoon. This rain won't let up soon, and you look like you could use something warm. Against her better judgment, Mira followed. Something about this stranger both unsettled and calmed her. Like the sea itself, dangerous yet somehow home. The tide is turning, Elian murmured as they walked. Words not meant for her, yet striking some forgotten chord within her heart. And you, Marina, are about to remember who you truly are. Tides of truth, the tea shop was a haven of warmth and spices. The hissing kettle and murmur of quiet conversation a stark contrast to the storm's fury outside. Mira sat across from Elian, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup, studying him with wary curiosity. You called me by another name, she said finally, her voice barely audible over the rain drumming against the windows. Marina? Why? Elian's eyes seemed to shift color like the sea at dawn, blue to green and back again. Because it's who you are. Marina, daughter of Queen Nerissa, last heir to the throne of Coraline. Mira's laugh was sharp and short. I'm an orphan who sells herbs in the market. My mother was a washerwoman who died of fever when I was 12. The woman who raised you loved you dearly, Elian acknowledged, but she was not your birth mother. She was entrusted with your care when you were barely a season old, when the burning ships came. Something cold touched Mira's spine at those words. The burning ships, a fragment of a nightmare that had haunted her since childhood. Ships with red sails and hulls that glowed like embers on the horizon. 20 years ago, Elian continued, the kingdom of Coraline was the jewel of these waters. Your people, our people, were neither fully of land nor sea but both. We could breathe air or water, swim the deepest trenches, or walk the highest mountains. Our people, Mira echoed, noticing for the first time the faint trace of webbing between his fingers. Nearly invisible unless one knew to look. She glanced down at her own hands. Ordinary human hands. The royal bloodline runs strongest, he explained, following her gaze. Your heritage was hidden even from yourself. The markings fade when not in contact with seawater for many years. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the room in harsh white light. In that flash, Mira saw something else in Elian's face, a pattern of nearly luminescent scales along his temples, vanishing as quickly as the lightning. The armies of Drycroft came with their burning ships and poisoned smoke, Elian said, his voice dropping lower. They sought to claim Coraline's treasures, its magic. But they didn't understand that our magic comes from the sea itself, from the ancient bond between our people in the depths. If such a place existed, why have I never heard of it? Mira challenged, even as something deep within her responded to his words like a tide answering the moon's pull. Because they erased it, Elian said simply. Not just the kingdom, but the memory of it. The survivors fled beneath the waves where the poison couldn't follow. They've been there ever since, waiting for the one who could restore what was lost. And you believe that's me? A herb seller who can barely afford a room? In answer, Elian reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object wrapped in silk. He placed it on the table between them and carefully unfolded the fabric. A pendant lay revealed, a spiral shell the size of a small coin, iridescent in the lamplight, threaded on a chain of intricate silver links. This belonged to your mother, he said. Touch it and you will know I speak the truth. Hesitantly, Mira reached for the pendant. As her fingers made contact, the shell warmed instantly. Water beaded on its surface, though it had been dry moments before. More startling was the song that seemed to fill her mind. Not sound, but something deeper. A melody of currents and tides and ancient voices calling her name. Her true name, Marina. How is this possible? She whispered, unable to release the shell. The sea recognizes its own, Elian replied, covering her hand with his. Where their skin met, Mira felt a tingling sensation, as though tiny electric currents passed between them. As do I. His eyes held hers, and in them she saw not just recognition but a depth of emotion that stole her breath. Longing, hope, and something that looked remarkably like devotion. I've searched for you for 7 years, he said softly, ever since the seers foretold that the lost princess had survived, that she alone could heal the rift between worlds and save what remains of Coraline. From what? The poison didn't stop with the surface. Elian's expression darkened. It seeps deeper every year. Soon it will reach the last sanctuary where our people have hidden, unless someone with the royal blood, someone who carries both worlds within them, can purify the waters once more. The pendant pulsed in Mira's palm like a second heartbeat. Outside, the storm intensified, waves crashing against the harbor walls with unusual ferocity. The sea has been calling you all your life, Elian said. Tonight it's time to answer. Between two worlds, dawn broke over Luminara, the storm having washed the city clean during the night. Mira stood at the edge of the hidden cove Elian had led her to, far from the busy harbor, where jagged rocks protected a small crescent of sand. Are you certain about this? She asked, the pendant now hanging around her neck, warm against her skin despite the morning chill. Elian had already shed his outer garments, standing in just fitted breeches that ended at the knee. In the clear morning light, Mira could see the faint patterns of scales along his forearms and shoulders, catching the sun with subtle iridescence. The sea knows you, he assured her. It will not harm its daughter. Mira took a deep breath and slipped off her worn boots. The sand felt cool between her toes. Another sensation both foreign and achingly familiar. She had avoided the water all her life, haunted by inexplicable terror whenever she ventured too close to the deeper parts of the harbor. Now she understood why, not fear of drowning, but fear of remembering. She followed Elian into the gentle surf, gasping as the cold water swirled around her ankles, then her knees. The pendant at her throat grew warmer with each step. Your body remembers even if your mind does not, Elian said, now waist-deep in the water. He extended his hand to her. Trust yourself, Marina. When their fingers intertwined, something shifted in Mira's perception. The water no longer felt cold but welcoming, like an embrace long forgotten. She allowed Elian to draw her deeper until the water lapped at her shoulders. "Breathe normally when we submerge," he instructed, his face close to hers. "Your body will remember how." Fear flickered through her eyes. What if it doesn't? His free hand came up to cup her cheek, a gesture so tender it made her heart stutter. "Then I would never let you drown," he promised, his voice low and fierce. "But you won't. You are more than you know, Marina." Before she could respond, he pulled her beneath the surface. Panic seized her for one terrible moment, then transformed into wonder as her body instinctively adapted. Water flowed into her lungs, but instead of choking her, it seemed to filter through hidden passages she never knew she possessed, extracting the oxygen she needed. Elian smiled at her astonishment, the water magnifying the unearthly beauty of his features. In this element, the webbing between his fingers expanded, and the scales along his body gleamed with subtle phosphorescence. As they descended deeper, Mira felt changes in her own body, a tingling along her neck where gills had formed, the slight webbing appearing between her own fingers. The pendant glowed against her chest, illuminating their way through the darkening water. Elian led her to a hidden grotto beneath the coastal shelf. As they surfaced in an air pocket within the cavern, Mira gasped not from need of breath but from the beauty surrounding her. Crystal formations caught and amplified the bioluminescence of tiny creatures clinging to the rocks, creating a cathedral of living light. "This is one of the last pure places," Elian explained, helping her onto a smooth stone ledge, a sanctuary untouched by the poison. Their bodies were close in the intimate space, water droplets catching the ethereal light as they ran down Elian's chest. Mira became acutely aware of his proximity, of the strange new sensations coursing through her transformed body. "You're beautiful," he whispered, tracing the delicate pattern of scales that had appeared along her collarbone. "You always were, but now you're becoming who you were born to be." The touch of his fingers against her skin sent shivers of pleasure through her that had nothing to do with cold. Something primal and ancient awakened within her, a recognition deeper than memory. "Why did you really search for me?" Mira asked, her voice echoing softly in the chamber. "Is it only because of the prophecy? Because I might save your people?" Elian's hand stilled, then moved to cradle the back of her neck. "I was sent to find the lost princess," he admitted. "But I've loved you since before I ever saw your face. How is that possible?" "Our people believe in soul recognition," he explained, his eyes never leaving hers. "Some are born knowing they are meant to find another. I've carried the image of you in my dreams since childhood. Not your features, but the essence of who you are." Mira felt the truth of his words resonate within her. Something about him had called to her from the first moment, a connection transcending their brief acquaintance. Slowly, inevitably, they drew together, lips meeting in a kiss that seemed to make the water around them vibrate with harmonic energy. The pendant between them pulsed with light, casting their entwined shadows against the crystal walls. For the first time in her life, Mira felt completely whole, caught between two worlds yet belonging perfectly to both. The depths of deception. The council chamber of Luminara was a marvel of architecture, built in a perfect circle with a glass ceiling that captured and refracted the afternoon sunlight. Mira stood in the shadows of a marble column, her newly heightened senses detecting the faintest scent of salt and corruption beneath the perfumed air. Over the past week, she had grown accustomed to the changes in her body, the subtle markings that appeared after each return to the sea, the sharpened vision that now perceived colors beyond the human spectrum. Elian had brought her here to observe the city's rulers, 12 merchants and nobles who governed Luminara's prosperity with iron control. They sat around a massive table inlaid with mother of pearl, discussing matters of trade and taxation with practiced boredom. "Watch the one with the silver chain," Elian whispered, his lips close to her ear. "Lord Valen. He leads their secret council." As if on cue, the elderly man with the intricate silver necklace tapped a small gavel on the table. "With standard business concluded, I move that we clear the chamber for private matters." Servants and scribes filed out, leaving only the 12 counselors. Mira and Elian remained hidden behind the column, their presence concealed by a curious effect of the pendant Mira wore. It seemed to bend light around them, rendering them nearly invisible if they remained still. "The excavation beneath Siren's Point continues on schedule," Lord Valen announced once the doors were sealed. Our engineers report they should breach the final barrier within a fortnight. A murmur of satisfaction rippled through the council. And the water pumps? Asked a woman whose fingers were laden with pearls. Will they handle the volume? They've been tested in the northern mines, another counselor replied. Once we drain the cavern system, we'll have access to the largest deposit of luminite ever discovered. Mira felt Elian tense beside her. Luminite, the rare crystal that powered Luminara's lanterns and machines mined to near exhaustion in the mountains. And the inhabitants? The question came from the youngest counselor, his voice betraying a hint of discomfort. Lord Valen's smile was cold. Irrelevant. The creatures have no legal claim to Luminaran territory. If they resist removal, the pumps can be reversed. The cavern will make an excellent tomb. Horror flooded through Mira as understanding dawned. Siren's Point, the coastal cliff where she and Elian had discovered a hidden entrance to the underwater network of caves that housed the last refugees of Coraline. Her people. The council planned to drain their sanctuary for mining, killing anyone who remained. Elian's hand closed around hers, a silent warning not to react. They remained frozen until the meeting concluded and the chamber emptied. Only when the final counselor departed did Elian pull her toward a servant's exit. We need to warn them, Mira whispered once they reached the safety of a deserted alley. We have to evacuate the caverns. Elian's expression was grim. There's nowhere left to go. The poison has spread to the deeper trenches. The Siren's Point Sanctuary is the last pure water within swimming distance of the shore. Then we must stop the excavation, Mira insisted. I'll reveal myself. Tell them who I am, what they're destroying. They would never believe you. Elian's voice hardened. Or worse, they would. The burning ships came from Luminara Marina. Their ancestors destroyed Coraline. Do you think they would hesitate to silence you to complete their work? Mira stared at him, a chill spreading through her veins. What are you saying? That we do nothing while my people are slaughtered? Elian's eyes shifted, unable to meet hers. There is another way. Something in his tone made her step back. What aren't you telling me? He reached for her hands, but she evaded his grasp. The prophecy speaks not just of finding the lost princess, he said finally, his voice barely audible. It speaks of sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? Mira demanded. The royal blood, your blood, carries the original magic of Coraline. If willingly given at the sacred altar in the heart of the sanctuary, it could purify the poisoned waters. Our people could return to the deep sea beyond the reach of Luminara forever. My blood, Mira repeated slowly. How much of my blood, Elian? His silence was answer enough. You knew. She whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than any knife. All this time, the stories, the swimming lessons, She faltered, remembering the intimacy they had shared in the crystal grotto, the whispered promises and tender touches. Was any of it real? Or was I just the sacrifice you were sent to collect? Marina, don't call me that, she snapped. My name is Mira. I'm a herb seller from Luminara who was fool enough to believe in fairy tales. She turned to leave, but Elian caught her wrist. The contact sent a jolt through her, the connection between them still powerful despite her anger. I was sent to find a princess, he said, his voice breaking. But I found you. The prophecy is real, but so is what I feel for you. I've been searching for another way. Let go of me. Mira's voice was ice. You've had a week to tell me the truth. Instead, you let me believe in a future you knew couldn't exist. She pulled free of his grasp and backed away, tears blurring her vision. I have until the fortnight to decide which world I'll save and which I'll betray. Don't follow me. As she disappeared into the twilight streets of Luminara, the pendant at her throat pulsed with a rhythm that matched her broken heart, a royal blood calling to its destiny. Torn between land and sea, between love and duty, between life and sacrifice, crown of sea and shore. The night of the new moon arrived, dark and starless. Mira stood at the edge of the hidden cove, the waves gently lapping at her feet. Behind her, the lights of Luminara glittered like fallen stars, the city she had called home for 20 years. Before her stretched the endless sea, kingdom of her birth. She had spent the past days in solitude, avoiding both Elian's attempts to find her and the familiar patterns of her old life. The truth had changed everything. She was neither fully the herb seller nor completely the lost princess. She existed in the liminal space between identities, between elements. In her hand, she clutched a small vial containing a pale blue liquid, the result of sleepless nights combining her herbalist's knowledge with her newly awakened understanding of sea magic. It was a gamble, a desperate alternative to the sacrifice the prophecy demanded. I thought I might find you here. Mira didn't turn at the sound of Elian's voice. The excavation begins at midnight. Lord Valen doesn't wish to alert the public. How did you learn this? Elian moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain distance between them. I have my own sources now. Mira had spent her meager savings bribing servants from the council hall, piecing together the excavation plans. They're bringing 3 water pumps, more than enough to drain the main cavern within hours. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the gentle rhythm of the waves. I've been a fool, Elian finally said. I was raised on the prophecy, taught that the sacrifice was inevitable, the only way to save our people. When I found you, his voice faltered, I told myself I could fulfill my duty while protecting my heart. I was wrong. Mira turned to face him at last. In the darkness, his eyes caught what little light existed, glowing with an inner luminescence that betrayed his inhuman heritage. What would you do now if the choice were yours alone? She asked. I would take you far from here, he answered without hesitation. Find some distant shore where neither Luminara nor Coraline could reach us. But it would mean abandoning both our peoples to their fate. Mira nodded, having expected this answer. The prophecy speaks of sacrifice freely given. Tell me its exact words. Elian recited in a low voice. When royal blood returns to the sacred pool, freely given under moonless sky, the water shall be cleansed and the kingdom restored. Freely given, Mira repeated. Not life's blood, just royal blood. The interpreters assumed the sacrifice must be complete. Understanding dawned in Elian's eyes. You found another way. Mira held up the vial. A binding agent. It will carry my blood through the poisoned waters without diluting its properties. I need only give some of my blood, not all of it. Hope flickered across Elian's face, quickly replaced by doubt. The elders would never accept. I'm not asking their permission, Mira interrupted. I'm their princess, not their martyr. But I need your help with the council. As midnight approached, Lord Valen stood at the edge of the excavation site, watching as workers positioned the massive pumps at the mouth of a newly revealed tunnel. The cliff face had been carved away, exposing the hidden entrance to the underwater cavern system. Begin the drainage sequence, he ordered, satisfaction evident in his tone. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The counselor whirled to find Mira standing on an outcropping above the worksite, her simple clothes replaced by a flowing garment that seemed to capture and reflect the torchlight. The pendant at her throat glowed with an inner fire. Who are you to interfere with council business? Valen demanded, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. I am Marina, daughter of Nerissa, rightful queen of Coraline, the kingdom your ancestors tried to destroy. Mira's voice carried effortlessly over the crash of waves. And I've come to negotiate terms. Guards moved toward her but froze as the sea behind them surged. From the water rose dozens of figures, the people of Coraline, led by Elian. Their scaled bodies glistened in the torchlight, their features both beautiful and terrifying to human eyes. Panic erupted among the workers. Several fled while others reached for weapons. Stop, Mira commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Blood has already been spilled between our peoples. I offer an alternative. She descended to stand before Lord Valen, fearless despite being surrounded by guards. The crystal you seek, luminite, is created by the magic of my people. It forms naturally where our energy touches the earth. That is why your minds are failing. You've been harvesting what was left after our kingdom fell. Mira held out her hand, revealing a perfect luminite crystal that glowed with internal light. I propose an alliance. My people cleanse your waters and provide luminite. Your people cease the excavation and acknowledge our sovereign territory. Impossible. Valen scoffed, though his eyes never left the crystal. We have no proof your kind can produce more. Then watch, Mira said simply. She nodded to Elian, who approached with a ceremonial bowl filled with seawater. Mira opened the vial and added 3 drops of her potion, then pricked her finger with a small blade. 7 drops of her blood fell into the mixture, which began to glow with increasing intensity. The sacred pool lies directly beneath us, she explained. When this mixture reaches it, you will have your proof. Elian took the bowl and dove into the sea. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then, suddenly, the water around the cliff began to glow, softly at first, then with increasing brilliance until the entire cove was illuminated as if by daylight. From the glowing waters, Elian emerged holding something in his outstretched hands, a cluster of luminite crystals, newly formed and pulsing with energy. Lord Valen's composure cracked. How is this possible? Magic exists in the balance between worlds, Mira answered. My people need the land as much as the sea. Your people need what we can create. Together, we can restore what was broken. Dawn found Mira and Elian standing on the shore, watching as Luminaran officials and Coraline elders drafted the first treaty between their peoples in centuries. The waters of the cove still glowed faintly, cleansed by the magic in Mira's blood, a partial fulfillment of the prophecy that had spared her life while healing the poison. You rewrote our fate, Elian said, his fingers intertwining with hers. No one believed it possible to save both worlds. I belong to both, Mira replied. I couldn't sacrifice either part of myself. And us? He asked, the question weighted with everything that had passed between them. The betrayal, the secrets and the love that had somehow survived it all. Mira turned to face him, reaching up to trace the pattern of scales along his cheekbone. Some bonds transcend duty. I think we're proof of that. As the sun crested the horizon, Elian drew her into his arms. Their kiss tasted of salt and hope and possibility, a promise not written in prophecy but in the shared beats of their hearts. Creatures of both land and sea who had found home in each other. The tide is turning, Mira whispered against his lips, echoing his words from their first meeting, and we will rise with it together. The pendant at her throat pulsed once more, not with the lonely call of a lost heritage but with the harmonious rhythm of a queen who had claimed her crown on her own terms, not through sacrifice, but through the courage to forge a new path between the worlds she loved.